What if that 600 billion Saudi deal is nothing but smoke and mirrors? Americans are told it's a victory, but behind the cameras, there's no contract, no timeline, and no guarantee that a single dollar will ever arrive. $600 billion. That's what the White House says Saudi Arabia is investing into America. Sounds like a win, right? At a time when inflation is hammering American families and wage growth is stalling, this kind of foreign capital sounds like a rescue rope. But look closer. This number isn't new, it isn't signed, and it isn't guaranteed. It was mentioned months ago, behind closed doors, and today it's back, front and center, with no more substance than it had before. So here's the question. Is this a real investment or just a political illusion designed for headlines? In January 2017, just days after Donald Trump took office, he had a phone call with Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. In that call, they discussed a possible $600 billion investment over 4 years. That number didn't come with contracts. It was aspirational. Still, it became a talking point. Quiet, strategic, behind the scenes. Bloomberg reported on it at the time, but there was no follow-up from the White House. Now, 5 months later, we're hearing that exact same number again. But there's still no legal framework, no sector-by-sector plan, and no transparency on execution. To the average American, dealing with shrinking paychecks and exploding grocery bills, this sounds like salvation, foreign capital, American jobs, a booming future. But the truth is, this $600 billion may never arrive. There are no binding documents, no implementation milestones. It's all headline, no hardware. And that's not just an economic problem, it's a credibility problem. Because when global investors, media, and citizens can't verify the numbers, trust erodes fast. The number didn't come out of nowhere. It was already on the table 5 months ago. So is this a fresh deal or just recycled PR? Because if Americans are being told to celebrate a deal that was already promised behind closed doors, we need to ask, what exactly changed? On the surface, the announcement in Riyadh seemed like breaking news. $600 billion in Saudi commitments to the United States. But for those who've been watching closely, it was déjà vu. The same $600 billion figure had already been discussed between Trump and Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman during a phone call in January 2017, just days after the inauguration. At the time, the commitment wasn't publicized widely. It wasn't formal. There were no press releases. But the number, $600 billion, was already in the conversation. So why bring it up again now, months later, and present it as new? Observers say the repackaging was deliberate. It serves a narrative. Imagine a CEO tells shareholders, "We just closed a $600 million deal," but months later it turns out he was referring to a deal he merely talked about earlier in the year. No signature, no deliverables, just recycled confidence. Would that pass in a boardroom? So why is it okay in geopolitics? For President Trump, known for his Art of the Deal brand, showing a headline number like this at a high-stakes diplomatic summit sends a strong signal, not necessarily of progress, but of power. But for market analysts, it raises red flags, because when a number resurfaces without new terms, it suggests the structure behind it may still be missing. The figure released by the White House is big, historic even, but it's not a single deal. It's a patchwork of non-binding commitments spread across sectors over multiple years with zero enforceability. These are called MOUs, Memorandums of Understanding. They sound official, but they are legally toothless. Think of them as handshake agreements, full of intent, empty on delivery. CNBC analysts have long warned MOUs are political tools, not financial transactions. They allow leaders to generate headlines without committing to anything measurable. Let's break it down. $4.8 billion for Boeing jets, $5.8 billion in healthcare partnerships, $3.4 billion for a refinery upgrade. That's less than $15 billion total. Where's the rest of the 600? Here's the uncomfortable truth. Most of the $600 billion is soft capital, intentions, political gestures, future possibilities, not actual cash, not signed contracts, not money in motion. And while that may work in a press room, it doesn't work in financial markets. Wall Street doesn't invest in intentions. It invests in numbers you can verify and in deals you can enforce. Think of it like this. A city mayor announces a new subway line. Big press event. giant ribbon, applause, but there's no budget, no engineers, no construction date. Just a drawing and a promise. Would you plan your commute around that? So why announce a figure like this? Simple. Optics. Because 600 billion sounds better than saying, we're still negotiating. But here's the danger. When governments inflate expectations without follow-through, it breeds cynicism, and cynicism kills trust, especially in times of economic uncertainty. $4.8 billion for Boeing, a massive win on paper. But is this really about planes? Or is it about power, prestige, and politics? Saudi Arabia has committed to buying 378 Boeing aircraft, worth approximately $4.8 billion. It's one of the few pieces in the $600 billion deal that has a number, a buyer, and a product. For Boeing, this is a welcome headline. The company was facing slowing orders in the Middle East, safety concerns from previous crashes, and increasing competition from Airbus. A Saudi order helps restore confidence. But this deal is more than economics. It's diplomacy with wings, a symbol of US-Saudi alignment, not just in commerce, but in global influence. Why 378 planes? And why now? Saudi Arabia is building out its aviation and tourism sectors under Vision 2030. New airlines, more routes, more autonomy. But here's the twist. This order also helps Boeing compete against China's COMAC and against Airbus in Europe. In other words, Saudi's dollars are strengthening America's aviation dominance at the expense of US rivals. And the impact doesn't stop in Saudi. This order keeps Boeing's supply chain in motion, from Kansas to South Carolina to Washington State. Thousands of US jobs, engineers, machinists, software systems, depend on deals like this. Picture this. A machinist in Wichita has been on reduced hours since the 737 MAX crisis. Then the Saudi order comes through. Her shift hours increase. New training sessions begin. To her, this isn't geopolitics. It's groceries, rent, school supplies. So while 4.8 billion may seem small in a 600 billion headline, it's one of the few pieces that's real, tangible, and already in motion. $5.8 billion into healthcare. That sounds like lives saved, hospitals built, and medicine delivered. But what exactly is Saudi Arabia investing in? And who really benefits? American patients or American corporations? As part of the broader US-Saudi investment package, nearly $5.8 billion is pledged for healthcare. It covers biotech, hospital systems, pharmaceuticals, and digital health platforms. Meet Lisa, 45, single mum in Texas. She sees the headline, Saudi invests $5.8 billion in US healthcare. Her son needs insulin. Her employer doesn't offer insurance. She asks, does this mean cheaper meds? The answer, probably not, because this deal was never about her. At first glance, this looks like a shared vision for public good, but the deal doesn't target the uninsured. It doesn't mention US Medicare. This is not healthcare reform, it's healthcare business. Saudi Arabia wants world-class medical infrastructure. Under Vision 2030, it plans to cut medical tourism and build its own health economy. American firms like GE Health, Mayo Clinic, and Merck are stepping in to capture the contracts. And for corporations, this is a golden bridge. They gain access to Gulf capital, tax-friendly jurisdictions, and low-regulation innovation zones. But the risks: data sovereignty, drug pricing, medical ethics across jurisdictions, and once again, the lack of transparency. So while $5.8 billion sounds like a lifeline, in reality, it's a pipeline of opportunity for companies, not necessarily for communities.